Come on, Annie. Let's go to the movies.
This is the Cinereelists episode 617. My name is Kyle.
My name is James.
And my name is Zach.
And we're here to talk movies, movie lists, and movie obsession for the next hour or so. And guys, we have quite the movie list to discuss this week.
Definitely. It's our annual top 20 of the year that just passed.
Yeah, that's a great wordy way to put it, James.
Well, I mean, we don't do the top 20 of 2023 every year.
No, but you could just say it's our top 20 of the year, of the previous year. Our top
Right, or the
20 of
previous year.
2023.
We're in
Yeah.
2024, so it can't be
Yeah.
the top 20 of the year because the year is 2024.
Hey, James, you haven't seen 2024 movies already?
Not yet.
Okay. How many?
I have
how
seen
many-
one.
Okay.
Beekeeper.
Oh, I want to see it.
Ironically, not a keeper.
Okay. I don't think it's going to be good. Is it fun?
I didn't. No.
No. Okay.
It was not fun.
I mean, I'm sure there's pieces of it that maybe somebody will have fun with, but I kind of feel like I wasted my time on it. That's for sure.
Do you know what I Googled after the trailer? I Googled, was honey flammable?
Oh, yeah.
And it is not. It is not flammable.
I never thought honey would be flammable. Nothing about it makes me think this little squeezy bear is a grenade in my hands.
But the movie presents it as if it's flammable, at least in the trailer.
I mean, the movie also presents like in the whole Illuminati controlling everything and the beekeepers. The trailer gives you a lot of what's going on, like greater world in that movie.
Not to burst everybody's bubble, but having seen the movie, there is nothing in it about honey being flammable or any machination about him using honey as flammable.
There is
or anything.
zero reference to honey being flammable.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's just something they put into the trailer or cut together in a weird way.
Wow.
I mean, I think in the trailer, it's not like some weird cut. I think they really say, honey's flammable. Who knew?
Are you sure, James, you checked out during that line? That's literally not in the movie.
I don't feel like I checked out, but maybe I did, and they say it exactly as Kyle just said it. But I don't even think they say that in the trailer. I think he's misremembering.
I'm pretty sure that's in the trailer.
It's definitely in the trailer because Zach and I are discussing it.
Yeah, and I Googled, is honey flammable after watching the trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's implied in the trailer, but I don't think.
It's pretty cut and
All
dry.
right. I'm convinced by James's assurance that it is in the movie.
I will give James the benefit of the doubt that there are things sometimes that are in trailers which are not in the movie.
Yeah.
Did James maybe not pay attention or take a little old man nap? Possibly too. So
I don't think I did. I remember every single second of that movie.
When you're awake, yes. No one remembers being asleep.
Sure. Well, that's true. I guess.
I too remember every single second I've been awake.
Really? I don't.
No, I don't. Not at all. I can barely remember things that happened like hours ago.
Right. Speaking of remembering, I have a check-in this week. And this is the check-in. Congratulations, guys. This episode marks 10 years of Cinereelists as a podcast.
Really?
Is that true? Is that really true?
That is true.
Wow.
10 short years.
So we started in 2013?
We started the beginning of 2014.
2014? Okay.
Beginning of
That's how
2014.
math works. Wow.
So I threw together some quick stats, if you're curious.
Yeah.
The first episode of this podcast was recorded the 12th of January, 2014. 10 years ago. In 10 years, we've released 616 episodes of the main podcast. With Kyle, Kyle appeared on the podcast as the podcast's first ever guest less than a month from the first recording. That was on February 2nd of 2014. Then he started filling in for Zach in episode 433 in 2020 and basically just never stopped guest hosting. He's still guest hosting to this day.
Yeah. With guest host Kyle. It still says that on the business cards and everything.
For sure. This past week, I listened to that first episode, and if you're a longtime listener and you've never heard it, you should go back and listen to it because Zach and I explain the name. We talk about the concept of what this podcast is going to be. We talk about how we're going to probably change it over time. And we didn't change anything, Zach. It's pretty much exactly as we described in the first episode. Which
we used to have 2 episodes a week and play movie games.
Right, but we didn't start that way. That was a suggestion from a listener because they said the episodes were too long. So we split the episodes into 2 a week for a while. And then we gave up on that as well. In Kyle's first episode, he unironically says the phrase, "It's no Citizen Kane." Which I thought was hilarious. It's like one of the first things he ever said on this podcast was, "It's no Citizen Kane."
I just had to come in hot with my take.
For sure. The Patreon after shows. What episode do you think that started on? Closest to the pin. Us doing Patreon after shows. Now, Kyle was a listener. He wasn't a, guest host at that point, permanent guest host, but
I'll guess 55.
I was going to say around 100, just because you guys are doing 2 a week.
You guys are way off. It was 292.
Okay.
So about halfway to where we are right now. A little before halfway. We've done 193 after show episodes.
Wow.
Which means if you're not a Patreon listener and you want to become one, day one, there's 193 episodes sitting there waiting for you to listen. And most of them are evergreen, I would say, because most of them are just us arguing about something that's not timely for the most part. Finally, if you've listened to every word ever said on this podcast since the very beginning, you've listened for 45 days, 20 hours, 8 minutes, and 20 seconds of your life.
Does that include Patreon?
Including Patreon.
45 days?
45. If you just listen to the main show, it's closer to 41 days, which is still a lot. That is a lot of days to listen to us talk. That's like a month of somebody's life plus. How do you feel about that, Zach? 10 years, 45 days.
Well, so here's what that means is that we've spoken for basically a month and a half for this show over the past 10 years. That doesn't sound like crazy.
Doesn't sound crazy?
A month and a half of my past decade.
Sure.
Yeah, but that's a month and a half that people are choosing to spend listening to us. Right.
The question is,
they're sleeping.
Do you think there's somebody out there that has listened to every word spoken on this podcast?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I know we've definitely had listeners over the years who have been like, I went back and listened from number 1. But
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. That's a lot. I also know that we have some new listeners, particularly on YouTube, that probably don't even realize this podcast has been going for forever. You know what I mean? This is 10 years in the making, what you're listening to right now, for better or for worse. But anyway, I just thought we would start this very special episode of the podcast out with a little celebration. Happy 10 years, guys.
Happy 10 years.
Absolutely.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely.
You guys know, like, when a president leaves after their second term, they always do like pictures of like, here's them on their first day of office, and here's them on the last day of office.
Mm-hmm.
Like how
I kind of want to do that with you guys of like, here's Zach and James the first day they recorded, and here they are today. And here's what 10 years of podcasting has done to them.
If
Sure.
only we had a photo of that first day, but we don't.
I'm sure we can find
Unfortunately.
photos from around, early 2014 of both of you.
Sure. The first episode Kyle was on, I didn't know him at all.
Oh yeah, we met in Zach's apartment.
And like 10 minutes later, we were recording an episode. So if you listen to that podcast episode, this is Kyle and my like basically second conversation ever besides how's it going? Nice to meet you.
This is how the microphone works.
Right.
Yeah. And my wife was in Zach's bedroom taking a nap and playing Legos the entire time we were recording.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
I remember that for sure. Yeah, happy 10 years, guys. This is our annual best of the year episode, best of the previous year episode. Before we jump into running down our favorite films of the year, amongst other things, we need to remind you there's a video version of this podcast on YouTube. Check it out there. Search us up, Cinereelists. Find us and subscribe. Also, speaking of Patreon, you can check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cinereelists. Support the podcast, get extra after show audio. Obviously, we say this at the end of our hangover normally, but we should say it now as well. If you're a Patreon supporter, you've probably been supporting for a while, and we appreciate it. You know who you are. Also, leave us an Apple Podcast review, 5 stars only. We'd appreciate that. Or send us an email to heyguys@cinereelists.com with a comment, a question, a list suggestion, any of those kinds of things. Right now, especially, we are soliciting from listeners and viewers on YouTube your top 10 or 20 of 2023 list. So if you've seen movies in 2023, you have at least 10 of them that you can rank in order of preference, send it our way via email, heyguys@cinereelists.com. We will take those lists, combine them. Zach will add some algorithmic flavor to them and spit out a listener top 10 to be debuted on our next episode, the annual hangover episode.
Which I believe is in 2 weeks. So they have 2 weeks to do this. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Normally it's next week, but next week we're taking the week off, which I believe we haven't done in almost 2 years. We haven't missed an episode, which is kind of crazy. But also, it's helpful that there's 3 of us now. Much easier to hit every week, for sure.
Right.
All right. So send us an email. There's a link in the description of this podcast or on YouTube. You guys ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
All right. We're going to run down right now our top 20 films of 2023. Now, the first number 11 through 20, we're going to go through fairly briskly. If there's a movie that's never been mentioned on the podcast, feel free to take a little bit more time. But if it's something we've talked about, maybe give us an overview of why it's on your list, and then we will move on. And then once we hit the actual top 10 of 2023, we'll slow things down a little bit, go into a little bit more in-depth on those movies. Let's get to it. I'll start. My number 20, They Cloned Tyrone, which is a Netflix movie that I enjoyed a lot. It's a science fiction comedy, I would say, about this guy who lives present day, and he gets shot and dies, and then wakes up Groundhog Day style in his bed, and is like, he doesn't remember what happened, but he feels like something has changed in his life. Like he doesn't remember the day that he got shot and died. And so he's going through the paces of his day like he did the day before. It's not like Groundhog Day where it's a repeat of the same day. It's literally the next day. And then he starts to notice, his name is Tyrone. He starts to notice that there's other versions of him out there. And so he enlists other characters in his world to help him try to figure out what's going on. And I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was very funny and clever, and also just an interesting spin on science fiction. And also it's a little bit of a paranoid comedy, because he just becomes suspect of everybody and everything around him. And as soon as you think the movie isn't going to go another layer deeper, it does. And that was a beautiful thing. And that's why it's my number 20.
Great.
Nice. Well, my number 20 probably doesn't need as much explanation. It is Barbie.
Nice.
And I think a lot of people have seen this movie already, so I don't need to extol it too heavily. But yeah, Barbie's my number 20.
Great. My number 20 is May December. This is a movie directed by Todd Haynes. It's a Netflix movie starring Natalie Portman, who's playing an actress who's researching a role for a TV movie she's starring in about a true life, at least in this world, it's a true life story of a older woman who had a relationship with a 7th grade boy. She became pregnant. They eventually got married and then grew up and had a family and a life together. This is based on the Mary Kay Letourneau story, which happened in the 90s. And anyway, in this movie, Natalie Portman is kind of implants herself into this family to observe them and learn about how the family works and more about the relationship, and to sort of learn what makes the Julianne Moore character tick. And it's a really fascinating movie just in its presentation, because there is this corniness to the movie throughout, but it's intentional because it's sort of lampooning the idea of like corny TV movies. The movie's not like going too big about it, but there's these little moments where you're like, well, that's kind of odd, but you realize it's sort of the point of it. But there's also some great performances, especially there's a monologue that Natalie Portman gives direct to camera, which I really liked. I wish the movie had dug a little bit more into like the trauma of what the relationship caused upon this family, but that's not what the movie's interested in. It's more interested in like an outsider looking in to this family. And I thought it was pretty interesting. Number 20.
My number 18 was Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Your number 19?
19? What did I say?
You said 18. Let's make sure you're on the right number.
Well, it wouldn't be a Cinereelists episode without somebody getting the numbers wrong. Probably me. Number 19, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I found this to be a decent return to form. Probably my third favorite Indiana Jones movies. Indiana Jones movie, rather. And I just enjoyed it. I thought old man Harrison Ford worked out really well. They wrote it into the story excellently. The ending's a little silly, but the right kind of silly instead of the wrong kind of silly. And we all know what the wrong kind of silly looks like when it in an Indiana Jones movie at this point. And I also really loved that they gave him a fun sidekick to watch in what's her name from Fleabag, Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I thought she was cool to watch and fun to see him bouncing off somebody who was younger, but also, not weird to have another character in the movie. Overall, loved it. My number 19.
Cool. My number 19 was BlackBerry, which was about the rise and fall of BlackBerry, the phone. And it's something I never cared about, but I really enjoyed the movie presentation of it. And I thought it was a fun movie and kind of a palate cleanser to some other, nostalgic look back at 80s things that I thought were much worse, like Tetris. So I liked BlackBerry a lot better. So it's my number 19.
Right. My number 19 is Knock at the Cabin. And this is an M. Night Shyamalan movie. And M. Night Shyamalan is kind of in the zone now. And maybe he's always been here, but definitely recently. He's just making B movies. And some hit and some miss. And this one definitely hit for me. And I'm fine if he just keeps cranking out B movies every year. And if they're 50-50, I'll take it. Because Knock at the Cabin, I thought, was a really good home invasion thriller. This stars Dave Bautista, who shows up at this cabin of two married men and their daughter. And he has his own kind of weird band with him that basically says, we're here because the world is going to end and only you can stop it. And throughout this movie, you just don't know if these people are crazy, if there's going to be a twist, or is this family being singled out? I think Dave Bautista gives a really great performance in this as this reluctant villain is the best way to put it. And I think this movie, for me, worked. It kept the tension going. So whatever M. Night Shyamalan's doing next, I'm going to see it. Could be bad, but I'll still check it out.
Some would say he's been making B movies his entire career.
I would agree with that. Yes.
That's just some of them happen to elevate a little bit.
Yeah.
My real number 18 is Killers of the Flower Moon, directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Lily Gladstone, and Robert De Niro. And I think this is probably going to be higher on other people's lists. I think in general, critics like this movie probably more than I did. I enjoyed it. I certainly thought it was one of the better movies of the year. I had the change in story telling style at the end. I understand why it's there, but it bothered me, kind of the stage play presentation at the end. It took me out of it. Let's just say that. But overall, despite being very long, I did enjoy my first watch with Killers of the Flower Moon, my number 18.
Cool. My number 18 is similar, if not different. It's The Killer. Just similar in title. Yeah, I enjoyed this movie. It maybe in some ways it felt disposable, but I thought that there was enough in it that was intriguing and just well presented that I enjoyed the movie, and I do think about it from time to time. It's about a hitman who's ostensibly great at his job, but also makes mistakes, and then has to clean up those mistakes and protect himself. And it's got all the machinations of like a hitman movie, all the elements that you want to see. One pretty brutal fight scene right in the middle. And I thought it was pretty fun. So I enjoyed The Killer.
My number 18 does not have the word killer in it at all. So
spoiler.
Sorry about the bingo there. Yeah.
Bummer.
But it does have the word berry, as in blackberry. Zach's number 19. Zach, I agree with what you said. We got a slew of nostalgia product movies this year, and this was by far the best of all the ones that I saw. And mostly because of the performances, especially Glenn Howerton as this, this venture capitalist alpha male. He is so much fun to watch because he's going so big in this movie. And I would say if you have to watch one of the nostalgia product movies of this year, Blackberry's one to watch.
My number 17 is Napoleon, the historical drama directed by Ridley Scott, starring Joaquin Phoenix and Vanessa Kirby. Obviously, telling, I would say, slices of the Napoleon Bonaparte story, selected slices. And I enjoyed this movie. I thought there was clearly some elements of his life that were left on the cutting room floor, or some specific battles that maybe either got the short shrift or was not included at all, that maybe people would point to as important when telling his history. But I also alternatively think I appreciated the fact that he showed the perspective of the woman in Napoleon's life in the form of Vanessa Kirby's performance. That felt like something that I wouldn't expect from a movie that's telling the story of Napoleon Bonaparte, but one that kind of felt necessary, especially when most people, when they hear about Napoleon, they just think about a small, insecure guy, because that's kind of what we've reduced him to in today's society. And so you kind of have to get a little more than just his military grandeur on the screen. And I thought including his wife's perspective in the movie to a decent extent, if not a great extent, helped tell that element of the man. My number 17, Napoleon.
Cool. My number 17 is Flora and Son, the latest John Carney film. And I found this movie to be charming. Not quite at the heights that John Carney can give me, but it definitely had its moments, and the characters won me over when initially I wasn't interested in any of them. So I thought that was great. And I think it's an easy watch.
Great. My number 17 is The Three Musketeers: D'Artagnan. This is a French adaptation of the French story, The Three Musketeers. This is part one, at least, of the story. And I'm looking forward to part two. I liked this one just because it gave me a pretty faithful adaptation of Three Musketeers with some seriously well done action, like sword fighting and swashbuckling, and all the things I kind of expect from a Three Musketeers story and movie are there. My only other movie experience of this was the Disney version from the 90s, which is pretty campy. And this movie is going for a more faithful approach to it. And I'm looking forward to part two and seeing how they wrap up the story.
I enjoyed that one as well. My number 16, another movie I enjoyed, Wonka, which is the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory prequel, I would say. Or is the 1970s film, is that called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or is it called Willy Wonka? I don't remember.
I think it's
doesn't
called
matter.
Willy Wonka.
No, the 70s is Willy Wonka, yeah, and the 90s or the 2000s is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Gotcha. This movie stars Timothy Chalamet amongst many others, and it was directed by Paul King. And I don't know why I didn't put this together earlier, but Paul King is the director of the Paddington movies. And so I should have known this would be up my alley, and it was. I enjoyed it a lot. I kind of like on initial pass, when seeing the trailers, I wrote it off kind of as just another cynical attempt at trying to cash in on a movie that everybody loves. And when I actually saw the movie, I was like, this is a delightful film, much like the Paddington films are. And Timothy Chalamet was great in it, and the movie clips along, doesn't make too many stumbles that violate my childhood memory of the original film. Certainly better than Burton's dark, twisted version of this universe. And I thought they did a good job of differentiating themselves from the original, but also being respectful and referential when it made sense and not cramming things in just to play on people's nostalgia. So overall, pretty good. Probably best case scenario as these things go. My number 16.
Cool. My number 16 is a documentary called Take Care of Maya. And I watched this with my wife, and we both really were interested in it. It's about a girl who has a very rare, extreme pain disease. And the only treatment that she's found effective is basically to give her extremely high doses of very dangerous like drugs, medically administered or whatever. But she was taking 10 times the dose that would scare a medical professional from giving it to a normal patient. But that would solve her pain crisis immediately, and she could live a normal life again. Then she had a pain crisis and was taken to a hospital. The hospital had never, ever heard about this treatment, especially not for a young girl. And so instead they called Child Protective Services on the mother and accused her of having Munchausen by proxy syndrome, basically trying to hurt her daughter in order to get attention. And so her kids were taken away. And so the movie is a documentary about the legal battle to get custody of their daughter back, who meanwhile is in horrible pain without any effective treatment while that's trying to happen. It all happened in Florida nearby, I think in Daytona. And actually, this isn't covered in the documentary, but the real life situation has been resolved. I mean, there's a conclusion to the matter that I won't spoil that just happened a few months ago. So, anyway, the documentary is very good and very interesting. And I liked it a lot. So it's called Take Care of Maya. And I think it's on Netflix.
Nice.
Cool. My number 16 is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem. When I was a kid growing up in the early 90s, I was about all things Mutant Ninja Turtles. Love them. Didn't really engage with the property in the last 25 years at all as a teenager and adult, but this is my first time dabbling back into it, and or at least it gave me a reason to want to engage back with Ninja Turtles, and I thought this movie was pretty great. What stood out about this movie to me was the fact that the Ninja Turtles are actual teenagers, and they're voiced by teenagers, and they act like teenagers, and they're more interested with things like going to school and fitting in and crushes than they are with fighting bad guys per se. So I thought that was pretty fun. And then just the animation style itself, it's just kind of odd. They look like doodles. Everything's a little disfigured. The humans are kind of weird looking. And it was just a much more interesting movie to watch visually than a traditional 3D animated movie. So I'm assuming we're going to get a sequel to this one. And I am looking forward to more of this era of Ninja Turtles.
My number 15 is Anatomy of a Fall, which is a 2023 French courtroom drama about a woman who murders her husband, or did she? that's the question this movie asks is she's being accused of that, and she claims she's innocent. And I think why I enjoyed this movie and why it kind of stands out from just kind of your standard courtroom drama is that the movie, you kind of follow the person accused, right? Most of these, I would say, you're like following the lawyer who's second guessing whether their client actually did it, or the victim or something like that. You're not normally being tasked to second guess the person who's narrating the story to you, the person who you're seeing the story through their eyes. And I thought the movie was very clever in giving you just enough information over the course of the film, little drips here and there, leading you to believe she's guilty, and then immediately pulling that rug from out under you, and the opposite, just over and over and over, until at the very end, it has this great ending. I'm not going to spoil here, that we would definitely spark some discussion on this podcast and otherwise for anybody that saw it and would want to talk about it with somebody. Also, between this and last year's Saint Omer, I never want to commit a crime in France. That's for sure. Because I've seen 2 movies now where like they kind of detail how if you were on trial for murder, this is what those trials look like. And their trial process is very different than the United States. Like from what I can tell, you can't claim like you're basically in dialogue with several judges, and they can just ask you a question and you're supposed to answer it truthfully. And like, you can't just say like, I claim the 5th, evidently.
And
so you're in like constant dialogue with them and the jury, basically.
Right. Without getting too much into the anatomy of a fall. But the fact that there are so many times in that movie where I was like, someone should object to that statement. That's badgering the witness. That's leading. And they realize it's way more conversational in their justice system. Like,
absolutely.
It's more of the Napoleonic system than the English system that we follow.
100%. It was scary when I watch it. I'm just like, well, I never want to be sitting in that hot seat. That's for sure.
Yeah.
My number 15.
Cool. My number 15, already mentioned the Three Musketeers d'Artagnan. I thought that was a really fun movie, really well done and shot, and I'm looking forward to more from the series.
My number 15 is Sisu. This is a Finnish World War II movie about a farmer who's being harassed by a group of Nazis, and essentially goes John Wick on them throughout the course of 90 minutes, however long this movie is. And each action scene is increasingly bigger and a little bit more ridiculous than the previous one. And at one point goes a little too far, but everything up to that point was so much fun of just, watching this gleeful violence of one man creatively killing as many Nazis as he can, that it had earned a place in my top 20.
Equally violent is my number 14. It's the teen comedy Bottoms, which was great. I enjoyed this a lot. Directed by Emma Seligman and starring a bunch of people, but the 2 that come to mind are Rachel Sennett and Ayo Edebiri, who I enjoyed the entire cast, but those 2 are kind of the it girls for me of the moment. Forget Taylor Swift. For me, it's Sennett and Edebiri for sure. Not much to say about this other than it's like kind of a return to the raunchy teen sex comedy, but with a 2023 spin on it. And so I'm sure if you hadn't seen a teen sex comedy in 15 years, you'd be kind of shocked about the politics of this one. But if you're around young people or you've kept up with the culture, maybe it's not quite as shocking, but it's very different than your American Pies, I would say. But also in the same wheelhouse, oddly. I enjoyed it quite a bit. My number 14.
Cool. My number 14 is The Holdovers. It's a Christmas break movie that was rather good. Even though it was shot digitally, it definitely gave a film look to it that just felt very nostalgic, and all the acting was good. The story was well paced, and I enjoyed it a lot. Unfortunately, if you've missed it at this point, according to James, you'll have to wait until next December to catch it. But I think it's rather well.
You could watch it now. You just won't get as much out of it. That's what I said. If you still have your lights up, you can watch it.
Kyle, do you still have your lights up? Because it's not yet Martin Luther King Day.
No, my lights, well, they're still on the house, yes. They are no longer plugged in, not by my choice, but because we got a ton of snow in the last week, and the snow was actually weighing down on the extension cord. And okay, I guess I did unplug them, but it was a safety hazard issue. So for the sake of my home, I unplugged them.
Okay.
But sorry, Dr. King. Tried to hold out for you. All right, my number 14 is the previously mentioned Napoleon. I liked that this movie gave you Napoleon's, at least his career as a military general, leader, emperor, kind of through the lens of his relationship with his wife, played by Vanessa Kirby, this woman. A lot was drawn from their letters. A lot of this part of Napoleon is sort of not part of the official history and narrative of him. And I kind of liked that this is a different take on it. I also like that the French were mad that a British guy, Ridley Scott, was making Napoleon's story and making these choices about it. And I feel like this is some long-seated hatred between the French and the English that Ridley Scott was just digging back up to make his own Napoleon movie. But on top of that, Ridley Scott, he can still direct a movie. And like this movie, aside from being a interesting story about Napoleon through this lens, also just had some incredibly well-directed battle scenes that I think will go down with some of Scott's other great scenes he's directed in his canon.
Nice. My number 13 is Saltburn, which we did a whole review of a little while back, so I don't have to go into too much, but a great kind of black comedy thriller set in the mid-aughts, lots of weirdness, and just a great, pretty dark, very adult sophomore film for Emerald Fennell. Great accomplishment for a second film, for sure. My number 13.
My number 13 is Bottoms, which has already been mentioned. But yeah, a really good kind of modern comedy. I think it's fun to see the form evolve and change as culture changes. And so it feels fresh and new and funny and creative and good. So I really enjoyed the background characters and just like how committed everyone in this movie was to the film. I thought it was really cool.
My number 13 is a movie called Polite Society. This is a movie about a Pakistani family living in the UK. There is a younger sister who's, I can't tell if she's like high school or boarding school or college, but she's somewhere in like late teens, who is a martial artist in training. And then her older sister is a sort of wannabe artist who can't really get things off the ground. And they're kind of good, sibling friends. Eventually, the older sister is set up in a arranged marriage with this sort of attractive Pakistani UK playboy. And the younger sister does not trust this family whatsoever. And she tries to do anything she can to break up this arranged marriage. And her being trained in karate, she uses martial arts to do that. So she is essentially physically fighting the family members of this guy to try and stop this wedding. And then it culminates in a wedding that is pretty much an extended fight scene that's beautifully shot. You can just imagine like all these women in these incredible like saris doing kicks and flips and everything in slow motion. It's kind of a heightened movie. It's definitely having fun with it, but it's great to see a female-led action movie has commentary on arranged marriage. There's a lot going on. I wish we could have talked about this on the podcast. I really think you guys should check it out if you haven't had a chance to already. I think everyone should check it out. It's super fun.
Nice. My number 12 is a recent watch for me. It's actually a movie that just came out on Netflix last week, I believe. It's Society of the Snow, which is a retelling of a story you've probably heard of. There's a 90s movie called Alive about I think in that movie it's a soccer team that crashes on the side of a mountain during winter. And,
with Ethan Hawke.
Right. And they have to they have to eat each other in order to survive while waiting for rescue, essentially. That's what the movie's known for, the original one. And this is retelling the same story, but with proper details. Like it's not a bunch of Americans. It's like, I forget where they're Uruguayans who were playing rugby. Those details aren't a big deal. But the presentation here, I would say, is very different than the 1993 movie. Not that the 1993 didn't take the situation seriously or like delve into topics that the real life survivors had to, debate, go through, whatever. But in this movie, it's just treated deadly serious, I would say. Like their situation is very dire and they are constantly having to make life or death decisions, both their own and the people around them. And I love this. Like as a fan of survival movies, this is probably like a top 10 of all time. Maybe I've only seen it once, so maybe it's too early for that. But I really enjoyed this movie. J.A. Boyena, a director who directed The Impossible. So if you liked that movie, another survival movie, you'll like this. He also directed The Orphanage, which I know is on Kyle's top 100, a movie I haven't seen, but I've heard is good. And this guy before this was doing Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom, which was not good. And so I'm really glad to see he seems to have moved back into his wheelhouse and away from like ginormous budget tentpole movies. And I hope I get more of this from him. My number 12.
James, have you made up your mind if you would eat people in that situation or not?
I would eat people. Yeah.
You would eat people?
Sure. Would you?
Well, I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know the exact circumstances.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, once I miss that first meal,
if it was,
I get hungry fast.
It's like a layover.
Wouldn't take very. Kyle would be the first one in line. He'd be chopping bodies day 2.
That's really funny.
Yeah, like, don't shave me off a little flesh. Like I want a whole limb, please.
Gross.
My number 12 is the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Nice.
Which I thought was really perfectly crafted for what it should be, right? This movie does not need to exist unless it is just super fun and super referential to the source material. And it just gave all sorts of little coins for a fan. And I liked it a lot. I had a lot of fun with it. I was very happy. Even like Jack Black as Bowser was super great choice, surprisingly. So it was great.
With both Barbie and Mario Brothers being huge hits this year, do you think we're going to get more video game adaptation movies in the future or more toy adaptation movies in the future?
I think toy.
Okay.
Because Barbie
I think we're going to get both. With superheroes sputtering lately, I think we're going to get an onslaught of video game and toy adaptations.
Yeah,
for sure.
Any property you've heard of from 20 years ago is going to get a movie.
All right. I mean, they're probably going to go even farther back. Like 30 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. I forget sometimes that 20 years ago is still this same century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that time really marches on, doesn't it, Zach?
Apparently. Yeah. Happy 10 years.
All right. My number 12 is a movie that James and I discussed fairly recently on the podcast. It is Poor Things, the new Yorgos Lanthimos movie starring Emma Stone. As I mentioned on the podcast, this movie took a while for me to get into because Yorgos Lanthimos is going hard on his style at the beginning, and Emma Stone's making some choices on how she portrays her character. But as the movie kept going, as Emma Stone's character went into the greater world, and the focus of the movie became more clear to me, I really enjoyed this. And that's why it's my number 12.
Nice. I enjoyed that movie as well. My number 11 is The Iron Claw, which is a sports drama, biographical sports drama, I would say, about the Von Erich family of wrestlers, literally brothers and a father who all wrestled in the 70s, I believe. 70s and into the 80s. Maybe even a little into the 90s. I don't remember. But it's a pretty tragic story. Very well presented, especially from director Sean Durkin, who directed Martha May Marlene, I think is the name of that movie, or some combination of those names, which is a movie about a cult. And from the outside, if you look at wrestling as an industry, it's also kind of cult-like, I would say. Like, not only the fans, but like the industry itself, wrestlers, and how there's lots of families who have been wrestling for many, many years, I would say. And it's a very closed group of people who are very secretive. And this movie doesn't necessarily lean on that too much, but the idea of like family being involved in this family business is a key element of the movie. All the performances in this are very understated, but perfect for what the movie needed. Zac Efron, like you've never seen him before. I'm talking both physically and just from he's like completely unassuming in this movie. And whenever I see him in a movie, at least the ones that I remember, he's in a comedy. He's cracking jokes, or he's kind of like the sidekick to whatever the main, top of the title comedian that he's co-starring with. Whereas in this movie, he doesn't say much. It's a lot of acting with his body and with his face. And not that I ever doubted him, but man, he just really kills it in this movie. Also, if you're a big fan of The Bear, Jeremy Allen White, who's the lead in the Bear, is in this movie. And if you like The Bear, you should watch this too, because he's just a totally different guy than he is in The Bear, and like twice as big. I don't know how he filmed this and The Bear at the same time, because he's just ginormous in this movie. I just thought it was really very well done. There's a moment at the end that's like super sentimental. It's the only movie I believe this year that got me to actually tear up a little bit. And in that moment, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. It could have very easily gone completely south into like sappy land, I would say. And it very gently toes that line. And the moment it started to feel like that, they just kind of stopped where they were at. And I think that's what made it so effective for me as an entire piece over the course of 2 hours. If you don't like wrestling, won't matter at all. It's not really about wrestling. It's about family. Check it out. The Iron Claw.
Cool. My number 11 is a rare fourth film in a franchise to get me excited. This was John Wick Chapter 4, and this franchise is holding up. This one was super fun. A lot of great fight scenes, a lot of memorable moments. I enjoyed it, and are they making a John Wick 5?
Unannounced.
Okay.
I mean, they've already got in the can Ballerina, which is a spinoff.
Yeah.
Of John Wick. And then they've got a TV show too that will be on shortly, or is on. I don't even know. But There's definitely a TV show coming.
Yeah, but are we getting more with Keanu Reeves? That's an unknown question right now.
That's the unknown question. Yeah.
I want to know.
Well, maybe we will. My number 11 is a movie called Rye Lane. And I don't know if I've actually discussed this movie on the podcast at all. Maybe a top 10, last 10 a while ago. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on it than normal, just to hype it up for everyone. This is a movie with, you're not going to know anyone. The director, you're not going to know Rain Allen Miller. The two leads, David Johnson and Vivia Opara. I'm not sure. It looks like Oprah. Thanks for A in there. Opara, we'll say. Not going to know any of these people, but that's not a reason not to see this, because it's a really good movie. This is sort of a updated version of Before Sunset, but with comedy. It's about two people in their 20-somethings who meet in South London in the morning. They both just had bad breakups. They start a conversation, and then they organically decide to spend the day together. And just they walk around South London, have conversations about relationships and love, but also, run into their exes if they members and kind of have these comedic misadventures together. And it's a really just sweet and charming film that has a bit of a rom-com bend to it, but is more interested in like exploring the connection that two people can build in 24 hours than like having all the highs and lows you get from a rom-com story. And it's funny. So I would definitely say to watch this movie. The leads are really good, both David Johnson and Vivian Opara, and it's a very pleasant movie to watch.
I've seen it on a bunch of lists and I forgot to add it to my regrets, but I definitely will.
You should make it a regret. You should regret that you didn't add it to your regrets.
I do regret it. I didn't when I listed them, but I do now. I regret it, Kyle. You sold me. Awesome. Probably for the second time.
I probably sold
vaguely
you
remember
6
you
months
talking
ago
about
when I
it at
mentioned
some point. All right, that's it for our top 20 to number 11. Now we're getting into our top 10, our favorite 10 films from the year that was 2023. My number 10 is Maestro on Netflix. We talked a lot about it just a few episodes ago, maybe even last episode. I don't remember. Directed and starring Bradley Cooper. Also, Carey Mulligan has maybe an equal, if not slightly less than equal role in the movie. It's a biographical drama, a little bit of romance in there, here and there, about the American composer Leonard Bernstein. Kind of, again, Napoleon-like, takes slices of his life and just kind of presents it to you for you to get kind of like your own picture of who the man was over the course of time and decide, I guess, whether, I don't know, if he was a good guy or not. I don't know what the movie is trying to do. Just kind of give you a vibe for who he was, or if the movie's actively judging him. I can't really tell.
I think you're asking the wrong two people that question.
Why? Why is that?
Well, based on our conversation about Maestro last week.
Because you guys didn't like it as much?
Yeah.
Could be. I went back and rewatched like the first half an hour of this movie, the black and white portion that's kind of shot style of old Hollywood, and it is so good. Like from a directing perspective, it's so snappy and well done. The visuals of him like moving from backstage into the theater, it's like all these top-down camera montages moving him from the composer position to the backstage, and like the venues are getting bigger and a lot of compressed time. It's so good. I didn't watch the rest just because I was like needing to do other things, and the first half an hour riveted me so much that I was like, I need to stop this because I have to do other things. But I can't wait to watch the rest of this because already, 30 minutes into a second view, I've seen things in it that I think I appreciated the first time, but the second time I was just like, this is just way better than people are giving it points for, I would say. And that's why I had to put it in my top 10.
So James's number 10 is the first 30 minutes of Maestro.
Oh, it's all of it.
Okay.
How dare you?
I like those first 30 minutes too.
Yeah, it starts strong.
Yeah. My number 10 is Past Lives.
Nice. I'm so glad you got to this.
Yeah, this was a great movie. I really love the sensibility of this film. It just kind of has a quiet nature to it, which I find very intriguing, and it held my attention so well. And especially Greta Lee, I think is such a great lead to this film. She absolutely carries it. And I don't know how much to say about this film. It's about two kids, young kids that were friends and kind of had crushes on each other in Korea. And then she moves away to America. And then kind of decades later, they look each other up and kind of reconnect. And the movie goes from there. And yeah, it's just it might not sound like, it's hard to sell this movie, I think, but I really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, I definitely recommend it.
All right.
Called Past Lives.
My number 10 is the previously mentioned The Holdovers. And I ended up enjoying this movie much more than I thought I was going to. And that's because it was a different movie than what I was expecting getting into it as part of it. If you watch the trailer for this movie, which was everywhere for a while, if you're going to see movies, it's kind of melodramatic, and it leans into sort of the melodrama of the story of this, prep school teacher in the 70s who has to watch over the one kid who gets left behind. And in the trailer, there's all these things about life lessons and how you have to treat kids and being left behind. I was like, okay, we're going to get sort of a prestige picture that takes place in the 70s. And this movie is not that melodrama whatsoever. It's much more interested in the fun you can have when you have like a place to yourself on your own, but also watching these characters slowly warm to each other. And I think that's the much better version of this movie, with a little bit of the melodramatic stuff added in here or there, but it doesn't lean too heavily on it. Paul Giamatti gave a great performance as this cranky history teacher who slowly gets his heart melted as he has to spend time with this boy who's played by Dominic Sessa. Dominic Sessa plays this character so well because, like, he's smart and he means well, but he always just says the wrong thing and just has kind of this streak of meanness behind everything he does. So he's an imperfect character. Maybe like the most pure character of the three of them is the cook, played by Davine Joy Randolph, who has her own trauma going on. But just seeing these three people kind of become a found family and spend time together was made for a really pleasant and enjoyable movie, and something that just slipped into my top 10.
Nice. My number 9 is the aforementioned Barbie, which was so good. I mean, this movie did not have to go as hard as it did, but it went hard for sure. It's so much more than just a movie based on a toy, I would say. And really, it didn't have to be that. There's an alternate reality here where they hire some hack that just throws together a Barbie movie, kind of, Gem and the Hologram style. And, you get it out there and it makes $100 million and everybody walks away happy, and they make 10 more of them, whether you want them or not. But instead, we get this kind of very complete, very well thought out comedic dissertation on, gender norms or a reflection of society based on the lines of gender, as well as like how we're formed by the toys we play with or the media that we interact with, or, these types of things. And it just crams all these very heady topics into what manages to maintain a fun, light feeling comedic film about a doll. And it's just kind of a magic trick that all of that worked, and also managed to not completely turn off one side or the other of these fairly controversial topics, I would say. Certainly people who are extremists on one side or the other probably disliked the bulk of what this movie had to say, but I think the vast majority, and the box office would support this, enjoyed the ride, for better or for worse, and I did as well, and that's why it's my number 9.
Nice. Well, my number 9 is The Equalizer 3.
Nice.
I really enjoyed this movie. Denzel Washington is amazing. He's kind of always amazing. He's got to be one of my favorite actors at this point. And especially at his age, he keeps being in roles that I find super interesting. Like, I really liked his Macbeth. I think that was last year. So Equalizer 3, he basically plays a man who has all of the skills necessary to tip the scales towards justice. So if people are taking advantage of people, he will equalize the situation. And he's like in Italy on a job, and then he gets injured, and so he has to kind of like recover in this small little Italian town. And then there's a local cartel that's kind of like shaking up local businesses and stuff for money and protection money and stuff like that. And the movie's just so good, and I really like his character, and I like the cheesiness of the town and the doctor and all that stuff. And it's the first 10 minutes of the movie grabbed me right away and showed me things I hadn't seen before, and I really like this movie. So The Equalizer 3, my favorite of the Equalizer series, actually.
But you haven't seen 2.
No, I've seen 2.
Oh, you've seen 2 now?
Yeah, I've
Okay.
seen Equalizer 1 and Equalizer 3.
No. Have you seen The Equalizer 2?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. Why not?
He has seen The
Zach.
Equalizer also.
Let me try to sell it for you. Same director, same writer, same star, and I think 2 has far more to do with 3 than it does with 1. And so if you like 3, you should definitely check out 2.
I would love to. I own 2 on Blu-ray. I would love to watch it.
I mean, you could. It seems like the barrier is you.
Yeah, it'd be amazing to watch it.
Oh my gosh. Kyle, help us.
Well, I've never seen the Equalizer movie, so I would say yes. 3 is probably Zach's favorite one. I agree.
Start with 3.
No, don't do that.
3, 1, 2. Correct? Is that the right order to watch them?
No.
That is absolutely the right. No, there's no reason you don't need to watch 1 and certainly not 2 in order to enjoy 3.
Well, that's true, but also you should watch 1 and then 2 and then 3.
Just
In
because
that
numerically that's how it works.
Because there's a progression of character going on here, and I think much like The Holdovers, if you watch it the right way, you'll get more out of it.
Yeah, you should watch The Holdovers 3 first, and then Holdovers. Holdovers 2, Lost in New York. It doesn't really hold up very well, so I'd skip that one.
I agree. Yeah.
All right, Zach, anything else in Equalizer 3 you'd like to add on?
No, can't wait for Equalizer 5.
Before it's a skipper, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
it's like Beethoven's symphonies. The odd ones are the good ones.
Yeah. Please, someone hum for me something from 2 or 4 or 6.
You have to have seen 2 to make that judgment, Zach. You haven't seen number 2 yet.
I mean, I own it, James. I'm somewhat of an authority. It's the only one I own.
My number 9 also has a number in its title.
Okay.
And it is Godzilla -1. And this movie is
that our first negative number on this podcast?
Is this the first negative number on this podcast?
Movie with a negative number in the title.
It might be. Yes. It is kind of a bad translation because I was like, why is it called -1? And the idea behind the title is that Japan is already like down because it's post-war. They have come out of World War II, but obviously not as the victors of World War II. So they're they both morally have lost the war and also financially and other ways have lost the war. And then Godzilla comes down. So they're already at 0, and then Godzilla shows up. Now they're at -1. So that's sort of how the title is supposed to translate, but it didn't quite
so it's like kicking them when they're down.
Exactly. It's a kicking them when they're down kind of situation. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, this is, I guess you can call this a reboot, a soft reboot of Godzilla. It takes place in post-war Japan. It follows a man who was a kamikaze pilot during World War II. And you're thinking, well, how did a kamikaze pilot survive the war? And that's what everyone else is thinking. So he returns home. Everyone's like surprised to see him. They're like, I thought you're a kamikaze pilot. Why are you here? Why didn't you have this honorable death? So he's already feeling not a part of, he's not welcome back into society. And then this monster shows up, and this monster is just terrorizing both Japan at large, but also he has a personal stake in what's happening. So then he decides to join the effort to fight this Godzilla monster, to both, redeem himself and redeem his family. And this movie works because it gives you a human character to care about. In this movie, they don't really go so much into the Godzilla monster. The monster is huge. It's based on like the early 50s monster. So we're talking like, it's obviously CG, but it looks like an upright kind of like big bulbous monster, not like the more hunched over lizard dinosaur thing we've seen recently. But it gives you just the size and terror of Godzilla, which I think is really effective. There's a couple scenes where it's, attacking Tokyo, and you just see how immense this thing is, and how, if you were to be in a city and come up against this skyscraper tall monster, you'd be like, yeah, what can we do? There is no hope whatsoever against this thing. So this movie, I think, does a great job of balancing some pretty great Godzilla special effects and to give you like just the monstrosity that this thing is, while also giving you a human character that you care about, that you can invest in this story. And I was really surprised by this. A lot of people recommended it to me, who are, I would not say are like movie files, but like, oh, I've heard this is really good, you should check it out. And I'm glad I did check it out. So Godzilla -1 by number 9.
My number 8 is the only comic book movie on my list, Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 3. A movie I've seen 3 times now, twice in the theater. I think it's the only movie that I saw twice in the theater this year, which is normally there's 2 or 3 of them I watch. Anyway, James Gunn is back. The previously canceled James Gunn. He's back. The whole crew is back and going for a 3rd and final installment. And it was great, in my opinion. Much better than most of what Marvel has put out of late, like post Endgame, I would say. Not that I hate Marvel movies or really have that big a problem with them. I feel like some of the magic is gone, I would say. That's a pretty common sentiment amongst most people. Don't think that's too controversial. But I very much felt like this movie kind of feels out of place because it feels like it fits more in the post or the pre-Endgame Marvel world. And I think it fits in better back there. But regardless, it's here. It came out in 2023. My favorite comic book movie of the year. Super fun. I think Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is more fun, probably because this one focuses a lot on Rocket Raccoon's origin story, which is pretty dark, especially if you have young kids. And let's say the first 2 you weren't too concerned with as a parent. Maybe double think this one, just because there's a lot of cute animals being tortured in the movie. So yeah, slightly less fun than the first 2 because of that focus on a character, on a specific character's dark origin story. But overall, gave me the vibes I want from superhero movies. And that's saying something, because it seems to be far and few between these days for me to get really hyped on a superhero movie. So Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, my number 8.
Cool. My number 8 is Priscilla. This is the Priscilla Presley story. And I was really kind of captivated by the movie, especially by the performances. This was actually the first thing I saw the actor that played Elvis in. I know he's in like other things, but it was the first thing I had seen him in.
Oh, The Kissing Booth. Yeah.
Jacob Elordi.
Yeah.
I think this was kind of his first big role. I mean, he did this in Saltburn this year.
Oh, is that it? I thought it, in the back of my head, I had that he was in Euphoria.
Oh, okay.
Am I making that up?
He is or was. I should qualify that. His first big movie role.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. But especially the actress who played Priscilla, I thought was so great, especially because she had to start the film essentially playing a 14-year-old and then end the film playing someone, decades older. And I was just very impressed by how she could show that range. And I thought the movie was really good at showing this other side of Elvis that we don't get in other movies. And I just really enjoyed the entire thing. So it was great.
Well, that's convenient because my number 8 is also Priscilla. And I mean, I don't want to just echo and parrot what Zach said, because you kind of hit the nail on the head with this movie. I learned a new term from James this year called vibe movie, especially connected to Sofia Coppola. And this is definitely that, where you are sort of a fly on the wall as you're watching Elvis through the eyes of Priscilla. So as much as I don't want to say it's about him, because it's definitely about her, it's also about how she saw him. You know, we have the one idea of who this rock star was and what his public persona was. And then in this movie, we're also getting, you know, more of here's what one person saw who probably spent the most time with him amongst, you know, people within his circle. And yeah, it's just super fascinating to see the other side of Elvis, but also to see how this was started as a girl who became a woman, sort of adapted and changed, and sometimes didn't change throughout this relationship. It's definitely a pro Priscilla movie, but it's not taking too hard of a side either.
One of my favorite vibe movies of last year is my number 7, the aforementioned Priscilla.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Pretty close.
I like this movie one more than you guys did. Yeah, I mean, you guys have said it all, and so I will just round out our appreciation for this movie by saying I think Sofia Coppola has proven over the last couple decades just to be like one of our best American filmmakers. Like even the stuff that it isn't high on my list as far as her filmography is, I can see things to appreciate in it. And I think Priscilla, if it were her last film, it won't be, hopefully, would be a fitting last film. Like I think it's a great, totally Sofia Coppola style movie. Like she's not the only person that could have made this, but she's the only person that could have made it in this way. And that's one of the things I appreciate it and why I put it on my list as well as you guys.
Cool. Well, my number 7 is Wonka.
Nice.
Yeah.
I guess I need to see Wonka.
Now, Zach, before you get into it,
yeah,
you didn't want to see this movie, right? You were hating on it, but I
did not want to see this movie. It looked so cheesy and disposable and silly, and I was just not. Yeah, I'd seen the trailer, and I was like, no, thank you.
Sure.
And I watched this movie. It's in theaters. And I did something in this film that I don't think that I've ever done in a movie.
Oh, please, Zach, please don't
Laugh out loud.
No, that's certainly not true.
Stand up and cheer.
No, I didn't care that the CGI was unrealistic.
Okay.
That's like a backhanded compliment. It's like the CGI was unrealistic, but I didn't care.
Yeah. So pretty early on, the movie starts with him, and he's got chocolates that fly around like bugs and that kind of thing, and it just 100% doesn't look like it's actually happening. It looks very much like kind of cheap CGI that like they throw into kids' movies because kids don't notice or care. And I didn't care, even though I quite noticed, because it just, I was like, well, this movie is just going to be a magical little, surreal kind of thing. And I'm just going to go with it. And I'm glad I did, because I found it super charming. It had an actual plot with characters and motivations. I loved all the side characters. I was very pleased to find out some of the actors in the movie. I just enjoyed it thoroughly. I wanted to see how it would resolve. It was so different from the Johnny Depp version that came out a while ago. Just completely different perspective on like, why are we even doing this? And I thought it was great. I had a lot of fun with it. I think Timothée Chalamet knew the assignment and did a great job with it. By far, I enjoyed every single second of Olivia Colman in this movie. She was perfect for this role. She was so good in this role.
Her sidekick too, like them as a pair, was great.
Yeah, for sure. Played by Tom Davis. Yeah, it was just I surprisingly enjoyed this movie a lot.
You can see the Paddington DNA, right? Now that you think about it, you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah. And even Hugh Grant in the trailer felt kind of silly, but I really enjoyed him in this movie too. His character was great. So, and there was meaningful nods to the original Willy Wonka movie that like actually were sentimental in a way that was really nice.
Yeah, it did a good job of kind of like explaining the attitude that the 70s Wonka brings to the beginning of that movie. You know what I mean? Like he's just so negative about the kids and like they get into trouble and he's just like serves you right type of thing. And then they do a good job of like filling in why maybe like he wasn't always like that type of thing. Anyway, I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, me too. I wouldn't have seen it had James not told me I'd like it.
Nice.
Do you think I would like it?
No. You'd hate
no,
it.
There's no way. Yeah,
no way.
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. No. It involves whimsy and no, I'm just kidding.
Well, surprise, my number 7.
No, I'm not. It's not your number 7.
Is Bottoms.
Also full of whimsy.
Also full of whimsy, yeah. No, Zach or James, you were correct. This is definitely a satire of sex comedies. I was thinking more of the vein of the 80s, but I would say maybe sex comedies 80s, 90s, and early 2000s are all more or less the same. So choose your poison on those. Rachel Sennett, I think she's hilarious in everything I've seen her in. She was my favorite part of Bodies. Also Shiva Baby, she was great in. So when I heard she was in this movie, I was excited, and she delivered. Ayu Edebiri, who I knew from The Bear, was bringing the comedy in this movie too. But what I really loved about this high school was just how like insane it was. The the football players, they wear their football gear the entire time. You never see them not in full pads. They're treated like gods. The school motto is "Get horny," which people are cheering throughout it. There's this insane scene with like bombs, and then this fight that happens at the end, and it's just I could go on and on about how crazy this movie is, but how much fun I was having with it the entire time, and how funny it is. And I look forward to checking it out again, and I want to see more of what Ayo Edebiri can do with comedy. I know Rachel Sennett can do it, and I'm sure Ayo Edebiri can do it also.
Zach, was this, you already said Bottoms as well, right?
Yeah, my number 13.
Okay. Yep.
So none of us mentioned Marshawn Lynch. He was great in this as well. As
Did I mention that he's the teacher?
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
okay,
you didn't
yeah.
mention
He's so funny as the teacher.
Yeah, shockingly funny, I would say.
I mean, I'm not shocked that he's funny because I've just seen him in other things that have cracked me up, but I've never seen him like in a movie before. So
yeah. All right. My number 6 is Are You There, God? ? It's me, comma, Margaret, period. Also the movie with the most punctuation on my list. I'd like to say this movie surprised me, but that would imply like I found this movie nobody's ever heard of and is not talking about, and I didn't already know that people liked it, and that's why I watched it. Because that's how I found this movie. It was on a ton of lists, and I was like, this seems weird. I didn't even know this came out. I've never seen it, or I didn't even know it came out. And then now it's on top 10 lists at the end of the year. So it seemed like a good movie to throw into my cram session at the end of December, just because it seemed lighter. It's a movie I would say primarily aimed at teenage girls, which is what the book it's based on is aimed at. It's based on a classic Judy Blume novel, which is actually a name that I have some history with because I have 2 older sisters, and they read a lot of Judy Blume. And so I read more when I was younger than I do today. That's for sure. Probably because my parents limited access to video games and TV. which meant I read Judy Blume novels. And I remembered beats in this movie from the original novel, which kind of shocked me because I hadn't fully put it all together while I was watching the movie. But man, this movie was so refreshing, I would say. It's directed by the director of Edge of 17. It's her sophomore film. Her first was Edge of 17. So I remember that ending up on my top 20 list whenever that came out. And I remember saying, like, this movie's not made for me. And yet it's super enjoyable no matter who you are. And Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret definitely fits in that hole as well. Maybe even better than Edge of 17. And so there's a lot of comedy in this, and a lot of it is based on what a little girl who's about to go through puberty, her perspective on the acceptance of her peers and her perception of her parents and all of these types of things. It's comedy based on that. Again, definitely not my lived experience, and yet I laughed in the most wholesome of ways and appreciated everything the movie was throwing at me. Really, really enjoyed it. My number 6, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Check it out.
Okay.
Or watch it with your wives. I'm sure they would love it.
I think my wife has already seen it.
Nice.
I have not. I believe she has. Yeah.
She hated it?
No, she liked it.
Okay, cool.
My number 6 is not like that movie.
Okay.
It's Saltburn.
Maybe the opposite.
But I thought that Saltburn was quite interesting, subversive. It's got really good performances, quirky characters, intriguing plot. It gets a little wild, enigmatic ending. There was a lot of things going for it. It's not a movie that I recommend to everyone, but I found it to be very intriguing. So yeah, Saltburn. Was that on Kyle's list already?
No.
Nope.
James's list already?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I don't remember. Did Kyle like it more than us or less?
Judging from his reaction, sound like less.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. My number 6 is not Saltburn. It is John Wick Chapter 4.
Nice.
And this is a pretty strong entry into the John Wick franchise. You like Zach said, you get to a 4th movie, and do you have new ideas still? And this movie definitely has new ideas. It has some recycled ideas. I'm not saying it's a perfect movie, but it gave some great set pieces. We all remember the staircase. I think that's probably the most memorable. There's also that great kind of overhead sequence where he's running through an apartment, and it's sort of almost a video game style. He's going from room to room. That really stood out to me. But then it's the addition of new characters, which I think makes this franchise and the world it builds even more interesting. So the biggest character is Donnie Yen, who's introduced as a blind assassin. And the idea of a blind assassin is kind of tropey, where everyone's like, oh, he's blind, we shouldn't be scared of him. And then he can in the trope, they always can like just do anything like they could see. And in this movie, they have a blind assassin who's very skilled, but he has to use tools to get around the fact that he can't see. And it shows different ways that he adapts to his world instead of just being like Daredevil, where like, oh, I use my other senses. He actually has to use tools to adapt. And I thought that was a great way to build on that trope and to make it even more interesting. His daughter, I'm excited to see more of what they do with her if there's more movies. And it just continued to build the larger John Wick world. You start to wonder, like, how big is the John Wick world? Because it seems to be almost bigger than ours at times. Is everyone an assassin?
Yeah.
But I'm okay with that. Like, I don't need, this is not like the Matrix. I don't need a ton of answers for all these things. I can just sit back and enjoy it. And John Wick 4 did that for me.
We are in our top 5 now. Our top 5 favorite films of the year. My number 5 is the aforementioned Blackberry. Has Blackberry been mentioned 3 times?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a bingo.
I love this movie. Directed by Matt Johnson, director of The Dirties and Project Avalanche. Those movies have a documentary feel to them. and he extends that into this film. Again, the story of the phone, the BlackBerry phone. And yet it's really not about that. It's about these characters and how they interact. And really appreciated that this movie had, I would say, more reason to exist than just tell the story of BlackBerry. Like, I thought the comedy injected into the film made it clear that maybe this isn't exactly how it, laid out or how these characters acted in real life, but also gave them a reason to act that way. It was just like heightened enough that it made it enjoyable instead of just a history telling. And then the presentation itself, it's got this very documentary style presentation. I remember hearing in an interview that they literally filmed it from a distance as much as possible, so that you had the actors on the other side of the room doing their thing. And meanwhile, the camera and the camera crew were like 20 feet back, so as to just kind of let them live in their own world. And I think you could feel it. It was palatable that there was care taken to give this its own style and not just kind of be a pedantic retelling of a story that nobody really cares about anyway in the big picture. So overall, better, far better than it probably should be. My number 5, BlackBerry.
Nice. My number 5 is Anatomy of a Fall.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And this movie is so good at not resolving for you as you're watching it if she's guilty or not. Like, it puts you in the place of the jury, where you're constantly wondering, like, did she do it or did she not?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like the movie is even manipulating me or playing games with me. In order to keep me in that state, it really is just presenting a reality, right? Which is messy and complicated. And it's almost as if there isn't a truth out there, that like there's no real answer about what happened. It's just the aftermath and the guessing. And it's like we at some point create what happens or doesn't happen, because there's no answer out there that's going to solve it. No one's going to find the videotape of what really happened, Anyway, it's so well acted, first of all, especially by the lead actress, and the son. He's really talented for his age too. And yeah, we get this little glimpse into the French legal system, which, I guess the way it's presented seems to be on face value accurate. I'm sure there's an article saying everything we saw was ridiculous and wrong, but the way it's presented seems fairly reasonable. And I just really liked it. The last shot is just a perfect little last shot. I mean, how are you going to end this movie? And then the last shot is great because meaning had been like imbued into it. And it's a kind of movie that would be fun to watch and then go to dinner and talk about with someone.
Yeah.
And like, hey, what do you think? And like go through it, and everyone gets to be their own little jury and judge. And so I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think it's really, really good. And she speaks German, but she's in France. And so a lot of times they're all speaking English because it's a common language between them, because her French isn't very good. So it is a foreign film, but half it's in English. So if you're scared of foreign films, this one you can like dip your toe in a little bit.
Yeah, I wish we had a chance to discuss this, the three of us. I think it would definitely be one worth talking about on the podcast.
Well, it's going to be a slow February, so maybe we will.
My number 5, the aforementioned Killers of the Flower Moon, the Martin Scorsese movie. I mean, this movie starts off kind of like a true crime movie where you have, it's the true story of the Osage people, how they find oil on their lands, and then how white people show up to take advantage of them both financially and then take advantage of their rights and their lives so that they can also get that money for themselves. In this case, it's portrayed through the eyes of Leonardo DiCaprio and De Niro. But the movie quickly abandons trying to be a whodunit, and it's pretty clear soon who's behind this. And it's more interested in showing you, okay, these people are the perpetuators of this violence. Do they care? Are they aware that they're a part of this system? Do they think they're somehow the good guys? And it kind of dives into the psychology behind how someone can be doing these awful things to other people, especially through Leonardo DiCaprio character. I thought that was very interesting. We talked a lot about how maybe the Osage could have been given more screen time in their side of the story. And I agree with that, but I also, the more I thought about this movie, the more I thought like it works to give you the Leonardo DiCaprio side of the story, because it is like on almost the obliviousness of his part in all of this. This movie definitely is better than if it was a movie about the FBI. So I'm glad that they made the pivot that they did to this. And yeah, I mean, Scorsese, like you said, James, he has this unique ending that I think kind of puts a bow on the whole movie, but it doesn't feel too tidy. It works really well. So this movie that I want to watch again, it just hit Apple TV. So I need to set aside 3.5 hours again to watch it, but I'll look forward to seeing it again. It's definitely in my top 5.
Nice. I wonder if on rewatch I'll appreciate the ending more, knowing it's coming.
Right. If it wouldn't be so surprising.
Right. Speaking of surprising, my number 4, Past Lives, which Zach mentioned on his list. I loved this, and I'm tempted to call it a slight movie, maybe in the plot world. Like if you're looking for a plot heavy movie that's constantly shifting the sand underneath you, then maybe Past Lives is not the movie to watch in that specific moment. But it's definitely a movie you should get to at some point when you're having a casual evening and you don't want to hear any gunfire, maybe. Yeah, Past Lives, the story of a woman who has kind of a young love as a child, and over the course of decades, she loosely keeps in touch with this young love. And meanwhile, she lives her life. She moves halfway across the world and gets a career and meets a new man and gets married and is married for, nearly a decade. When she finally sees this guy again, that she hasn't seen since she was, they're easily under 10, right? When the movie starts?
I think they're 12.
12. Okay.
Yeah, it's like 12, then 24, then 30, whatever. Yeah.
Sure. Too young to really have a real boyfriend or girlfriend, basically.
It's like a crush, yeah.
Right. It's like a crush. So that's the premise of the movie, is the bulk of it is them kind of reconnecting after these decades of being apart, even though they've kind of loosely here and there kept up with each other. I'm leaving stuff out just because there's not a whole lot to discover on your own. What I really like about this movie is just how gentle it treats its characters, while also keeping them extremely interesting and making me want to know how this is going to play out, because the relationship complications that the movie presents are super realistic and very logical, and yet like at any moment you can feel the potential for someone to make a life-changing decision or a life-changing mistake.
Sure.
And in that way, it's kind of a thriller in a weird way, because about halfway through the movie, you're just kind of like, these movies typically have a villain in it, not a super villain, just some character that they throw in the mix that's going to be the deciding factor and push these characters into making a decision one way or the other, and help justify those decisions farther down the line. And this movie follows that formula and introduces what you assume is that character, and then it plays out. And it's amazing in that it never made anybody the antagonist. And that felt very refreshing to me. It's one of the most self-assured dramas I've seen this year, and it's a freshman film, a directorial debut from Celine Song. And that really impressed me as well, because if you had asked me if this was somebody's first movie, I'd be like, no, you have to make 10 bad ones before you make this one. And no, first one out of the gate. Pretty amazing. The actors I had never seen on screen before, they were all great. The husband was perfect, I would say, and perfectly written. Just super well done. And I think everybody should check it out. Past Lives.
Yes. Great. My number 4 is Spider-Man: Across the Spider-Verse. And yeah, this movie is great. I think I like it better than the first one. It's just so original and creative and like bursting at the seams with freshness and originality. And yeah, it's great. We did a whole episode on it, but I love this episode. I love this movie.
My number 4 is Oppenheimer, the Christopher Nolan movie, the biopic about the man, Oppenheimer, and the bomb. And I mean, we discussed this movie in length on that episode. I don't even know if I can get back into it, because this movie gives you so much of Oppenheimer's life, both his professional life, his personal life, his life before the bomb, his life after the bomb, what people in his orbit are doing after the bomb that don't even directly involve him. This movie gives you so much of that, but it makes it all digestible and palatable and interesting. And I think that's a real feat of Christopher Nolan and his editing team and his writing team and how he directs a movie, that he can give you a very complete picture of a person, a very influential person, maybe one of the most influential persons in recent history, especially in world history, and just give it to all of you in this compact. It's 3 hours long, but it is a dense 3 hours. But I just, at no point seeing this movie was I bored or confused or lost. The whole time I knew where I was, what was happening. And I think it's a true testament to Nolan. And then just acting wise, I mean, Cillian Murphy's great. Robert Downey Jr. is in this. You have Matt Damon, who I forget that he was in Interstellar. Like, this is his second time working with Nolan, and he's thankfully adding a little levity to what's a pretty serious movie. He's real pleasant to have in this movie, and I look forward to watching this one again also. Because I'm sure there's things I did not pick up the first time that I'll pick up again, but I never felt lost or overwhelmed at all with this movie. Maybe it was a little loud, but that could just be.
You're getting old, Kyle.
Oh, I saw a movie in the theater today, and I was thinking of all the things that are bothering me. I'm like, I'm not going to bring this up on the podcast because I'm just going to get made fun of. So,
okay.
How about we give you like a 3-minute immunity?
Okay, I'll give you the one that was the weirdest.
Okay.
The woman next to me checked her blood sugar during the movie. This was a kid's movie. It was Migration, so it wasn't like I was but she checked her blood sugar and turned her phone camera on. So for 3 minutes, her phone flashlight was on as she was checking her, drawing her blood and doing her whole diabetic blood sugar check. And I was just like, okay, can we maybe go to the restroom? Or I don't know. It seemed like a really, it doesn't bother me in public. It's just more like we're in a dark space. You have your flashlight on. This doesn't seem like maybe the best place to do this right now.
A very ableist angle you're taking right now, Kyle.
Is it?
Yeah. He's got immunity from, he has 3 minutes of immunity for me.
You gave him immunity. I didn't.
That was the only really.
That was the worst of it. That's not even bad.
Well, it was mostly, again, I wasn't bothered by the fact that she was checking her blood sugar. It was the flashlight on the whole time.
Sure.
That's what felt like. This is not, don't check your blood sugar in public. Maybe don't do this in the movie theater.
She should just stab herself with a needle in the pitch black.
No, I don't. Again, I'm not diabetic, so I don't know quite the ritual or when you should and shouldn't. It just seemed like an odd time at the moment to be doing that.
Was she there with
setting.
kids?
No, she was there with her partner, with another adult.
All right.
I did not see any kids
All right.
in tow.
If she was there with kids, then maybe she like wouldn't have another adult. Like she'd have to drag kids to go to the bathroom. But since you're saying she was there with another adult, then
Yes,
maybe she could have gone to the bathroom.
maybe.
I don't know. Maybe migration was so riveting she just couldn't leave her seat.
The other thing is my movie theater is now selling custom like themed blankets. So they're definitely 100% part of the problem.
That is awesome. That's so awesome.
Yeah. I was just like, no. Everyone's like, oh, those are cute. I was just getting angry in my seat. No. See,
That's
first it's the
amazing.
blankets, then it's the blood sugar. Where's the line, people? Slippery slope.
For sure.
Okay, 3 minutes over.
What's
your number 3?
My number 3 is Beau is Afraid, which we did a very long episode on, so we don't have to go into it too deep. But I continue to enjoy Ari Aster in different shades. I would say this is his Cinereelists black comedy starring Joaquin Phoenix, amongst other fine actors. It's a sprawling travel movie, I would say, that just has a litany of wacky situations and characters and a great animated sequence right smack in the middle of the movie. I loved how the movie slowed down and kind of stuck to one location in the last hour or so. And I was just this movie's trying to sell a lot, and I was buying all of it. My number 3, Beau is Afraid.
Well, James, you have to be a pretty unique person to put Beau is Afraid as your number 3 of an entire year. And I guess we share that in common because it's my number 3 as well.
Awesome.
Man, Beau is Afraid is, I think it's riveting. I mean, it's definitely harrowing. It's his perspective, lived experience is awful. But it makes for really interesting cinema. And I was totally into it all the way through the end. I thought I even liked the last controversial scene. I think it's really, really fascinating cinema, and I was totally into it. So Beau's Afraid, also my number 3.
Nice. Kyle, is it your number 3?
No, but it is a bingo.
Okay.
Anatomy of a Fall is my number 3.
That's a bingo.
We've discussed this movie a lot already. You guys have made great points about the nature that the crimes presented, about the nature of the court system. I agree with all of those. I wonder how someone can be so sad in the French Alps. It's so beautiful up there. But that's not what this movie's about. What I found, something that you guys had not mentioned that really stuck out to me, was just how this relationship was picked apart. And it made me wonder, like, what if your relationship you had with someone was put under the microscope and every conversation was examined and taken into different contexts, and you had to try to explain every word you said and every action you took? And would you end up, even though there wasn't a crime involved, would you end up looking innocent or guilty through all of that? And I thought that was very interesting, how what could be maybe inane or regular, or, oh yeah, this is how we always talk to each other. Things can have, conversations can happen, and then someone later plays it again and dives into all of it, and you have to explain everything you were saying and meaning through all of that, and just how easy it is to misconstrue words. I thought was really fascinating, and this movie was definitely a lot about the nature of conversations and memory and how that plays into this trial. There is so much circumstantial evidence being thrown around in this trial that it is fascinating compared to the American system, which is based so much more on, like, where's the body, where's the weapon, concrete evidence is our system.
Yeah. What's the term they use in the American system when somebody is like
Reasonable doubt?
Talking secondhand about something?
Hearsay.
Yes. Whereas the French system felt like there was a lot of hearsay going on in that.
Oh yeah, there's so much. Yeah, and so much of it just like people saying, "Oh, I remember this happening." It's
right, just telling a story basically. Whereas in the U.S., they'd constantly be interrupted because you can only say what you physically witnessed, type of thing.
Right. Yeah, you can't say what you heard someone say, or exactly. So yeah, that was a great movie.
Nice. I'm glad it hit all three of our lists. My number 2, my second favorite movie, and I kind of feel like my number 3 and my number 2 say maybe too much about me. But my number 2 is Poor Things from Yorgos Lanthimos.
Yeah.
Probably if you put Poor Things and Beau is Afraid together, they're like the two movies that normies are probably most likely to be like, you're insane. I hated that. type of thing. And so I know critics like those movies in general, but like if I put those in front of pretty much anybody I know other than you guys, I think it's a real roll of the dice on either of them as far as whether they would have an appreciation for it. But I do. Poor Things is great. Yorgos Lanthimos, I like most of his movies. I like all of his movies, actually. The ones I've seen. I haven't seen Alps and the other one that I've been claiming I'm going to watch for 8 years now. But the ones I've seen from Dogtooth on, all great, all interesting tone, all kind of twisted in their own ways, but like in different ways at the same time. And Poor Things is no different than that. It's such a zany, colorful, wild world that he built. He populated it with actors that I already liked and then pulled things out of them that I had never seen before. I think that's an accomplishment. I think most of the people in this movie, the top line stars, are just very brave people who clearly have a high threshold for risk because there's a world where this doesn't work at all. And you just end up either making an idiot of yourself on screen or literally showing a lot of flesh over the course of a 2-hour film that, maybe people wouldn't find an artistic value to. And I like the spin on polite society, what that even means and why it matters to people. And I just appreciated everything that the movie had to offer, especially the presentation, the actors, the music, everything, I guess. I appreciated everything. My number 2, Poor Things.
Cool. My number 2 is Oppenheimer, which Kyle already mentioned. This movie was so good. I was excited to see it, and it didn't disappoint. It was really well done. It was really well captured, and I liked that it had that Nolan touch of, he messed with the timeline a little bit to tell two stories concurrently, and I thought it worked. And I thought the acting was really good. All the random little side characters were great. I just really enjoyed this theatrical experience and the movie as well. So my number 2 is Oppenheimer.
Great. My number 2 is Barbie. And I think one of you said this movie has no business being as good as it is, and I completely agree. This movie could have been a throwaway movie about a doll, but instead, Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach said, hey, how far can we get away with making this a movie about misogyny and the patriarchy and the experience of the American woman? And can we get this past Mattel? And I would say for the most part, they got it all past Mattel. Mm-hmm. Maybe Mattel, figured out, hey, this would be a hit, or maybe they just were not really paying attention. But this movie works. A lot of people talk about the Ryan Gosling performance because that's definitely like maybe the one that's the most surprising. It's definitely the funniest. He has the most to do comedically. He gets his own musical number, and he's a real pleasure to watch in this movie. But you also have American Ferrera and Margot Robbie. They're kind of doing the emotional heavy lifting through this movie, and they're really driving home a lot of the themes of what this thing's about. And I think one reason why this landed so high on my list and why I rated it so high was just because of like the conversations that it sparked. My wife saw this a day before I did with some of her friends, and then I saw it, and we had some really interesting conversations, and like both my perspective of it, but also what she and her friends got out of it. Because I think I believe we had your sister come on, James, to discuss Barbie with us.
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe? I don't remember.
Right. Because I think it's one thing for like a man to watch it and to see, like, oh yeah, I understand what this movie is about. But then for a woman to then see it and be like, oh, I've experienced what this movie's about. It's a much different perspective. So, yeah, I think this movie will be talked about for a long time, and it's pretty great.
Yeah, I kind of feel like another element of Barbie, which
That's a
was a bingo for us, is like between Barbie and Poor Things, those movies comment on male ego better than anything I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
I like both of those characters. I think the Ken character starts fragile, and then over the course of time, he gets confident. And then in Poor Things, the male character in that starts ridiculously confident, and then over time, he becomes fragile.
Right. Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. Very different movies for sure.
But they're both so much about how like men in society want to control women too.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Very thematically very similar, if not very different presentations.
Mm-hmm. My favorite movie, which probably isn't too much of a shock to these guys, is Spider-Man: Across the Spider-Verse, which I really love this movie. I rewatched it a couple nights ago just to make sure that it made sense to me. You know, I don't, how long ago was this? 9 months ago? Feels like forever since.
Yeah, it was early in the year.
It was early in the year, and I hadn't rewatched it, and I did, and I fell in love with it over it again. I mean, it's awesome. It's super vibrant, fun, fast paced, but at the same time, the animation is so specific to every scene that there's always something to just take in, like from a visual standpoint, just like my eyeballs like what I'm looking at type of thing. But also like there's times in the moment where not only are my eyeballs having fun, but they're connecting to my brain. You know what I mean? And it's emotionally affecting me, like, and not in just a way where like the script is flawless. It's more like the script, the voice acting, the animation, the background, the general vibe of the colors in general type of thing. It's just as well done as it possibly could be. I can't imagine making an animated movie, certainly about a comic book character, where you're in that much control of the emotion of the audience as they watch, or certainly my emotions as I watched. It's hard for me to get invested as I grow older. I think I felt that as I grow older, it's harder for me to get invested in animated movies and like the characters on screen. I feel like I have more, I don't know, brain space for real characters, like the characters in past lives. But in this movie, it proves not the opposite, but proves that characters who are well-rounded and interestingly presented, I can forget that they're animated. And I think that's what I do with Miles and his parents in this movie specifically, and his relationship with Gwen. I'm babbling at this point. It's beautiful. I'm sure most people have seen it. I can't wait for the next movie. I did have a little hesitation in like celebrating it this hard, knowing that like seems like maybe some artists were abused in order for this to exist, or at least like work life abused. And so don't love that taints it, which is pretty selfish viewpoint. But I just want to say for the record, if Phil Miller and whatever Lord is listening, take as long as you need on the next one. No need to push people. You know, just get it right. Take your time. Make sure everybody's happy. Put it out whenever. I'll be the first in line. My number one.
Yeah, the best art is made by happy people,
for sure.
With no deadline or crunch.
I agree.
Exactly. Yeah,
I agree. No deadline. Could be 20 years from now. Sequels that take 20 years are always great.
Everyone knows that diamonds are formed in very, just open air spaces. No pressure.
James, how many years has a Spider-Man film been your favorite film of the year?
Never.
Never?
Never.
Wait, since doing the podcast, or like, are you talking ever in the history?
Since recording these such things, never.
Okay.
I don't believe.
Interesting. Okay, so the first one wasn't your favorite of the year.
It was third, I think.
Okay. All right.
I liked it a lot. I like this one even more. Just I didn't mention it, but the first one is like ADD for me. Like my old brain can't keep up with it. But this one, perfect pace for some reason. I think they probably got feedback and was like, we need to just it's at a 99. Let's take it to a 97, and I bet we'll get a lot more of the people under the tent. If they didn't do that, it was a happy accident, but it worked for me.
My number one was Killers of the Flower Moon.
Nice.
I was just really taken by this movie. I was really impressed by it. From the first scene, I was like, okay, or the first shot, I was like, okay, well, this is gonna be a long movie, and then it immediately like subverts that, and I thought it was great, and yeah, I loved it. And Robert De Niro, so good seeing him in a great role, doing a great acting job. It's so good because I don't want to think of him as this like aging actor who's lost his step, and I don't have to now because he did great, and this is his most recent thing. And I just liked so much about this movie. So that's why it makes my number one slot, Killers of the Flower Moon.
Nice. My number one is also Spider-Man: Across the Spider-Verse. It's been my number one since I saw it, and obviously it stayed there. So it's had some staying power for sure the entire year. I rewatched this just this past weekend with my wife for the first time, and then my son watched it. He saw it with me the first time. This is his second time seeing it, and that Gwen Stacy opening finish, where she's like playing drums and kind of going through her whole story and the watercolors, and it's even better than I remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And that sequence finished, I just turned to my wife and she was just like mouth open, like, oh my God, like, what are we in for? Like in a great way. So yeah, I think that movie sets up what it's going to be so well and then keeps it. Like so many movies, how many movies have started great? You're like, oh man, I'm in for a real thrill here. And then they just cannot keep that pace going. And Across the Spider-Verse sets it up in the first 20 minutes and does not let off. It doesn't feel relentless, but it keeps that creativity, that pace, that storytelling the entire time. Towards the end, you have hundreds of Spider-Men running around the screen, and somehow it doesn't feel cluttered or weird. Like the movie can let you accept that there's going to be hundreds of these spider people running around. You're like, okay, I'm on board with that completely. Even though this movie is a part one, I think I mentioned some other point in this year, we've seen 5 part 1 movies so far this year. This one feels like a complete story. It gives you an arc. There's a cliffhanger. It's definitely setting up the next movie, but at no point did I feel like we got to the end, I'm like, oh, I'm so unsatisfied. Like what? Like I got a story, I got this arc, and now I'm ready for the next part of the story, which is going to wrap up the larger thing as a whole. It also, I mean, this just dives into what's the nature of like a superhero, of these canon events and the connective tissue between all of it. There's so many great ideas in this movie. And like Barbie, there's no way the animated Spider-Man movie has to be this good, especially with kind of where we are with superhero movies in the last couple of years. But somehow Lord and Miller keep cracking that whip, drive the people harder because you're making gold. No, obviously pay the artist, pay them what they're worth. Don't overwork people, but they're onto something here. And I am excited for the third movie, and I really hope that they can stick the landing because great setup so far.
I agree. That was our top 20 movies of 2023. Hopefully you heard of some that you enjoy as well. Maybe some you had never heard of or are going to add to your watch list. Feel free to add any of those for sure. We appreciate you guys taking that journey with us. We liked some other movies as well that fell just outside of the top 20. I should say, like, basically in my top 20, Guardians of the Galaxy Down, which was my number 8, are all 4-star movies. Priscilla to Poor Things was 4.5. The only 5-star movie on my list was Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And so that's why it had to be at number 1 for sure. But we also have honorable mentions. The only ones on my list are other 4-star movies that didn't make the top 20. That's where I cut the line, basically. Do we want to bounce on these?
I think you should just run through yours.
Just want me to run through them. Okay.
Yep.
The Holdovers is on my honorable mentions. It made both of your lists. Earth Mama was pretty great, I would say. John Wick 4 made both of your lists. Also 4-star movie for me. I enjoyed it. Could have easily made my top 20. How to Have Sex was great. And if you haven't gotten enough feminism yet, check out How to Have Sex. It's basically the opposite. It'll make you scared for young women everywhere, I would say. But it was good. The Killer on Zach's list. I like that movie as well. It's a good one. El Capitano, or The Captain, was great. It's like surrealist. These young Senegalians, I believe, are trying to cross the sea to Italy, and so they go on this big long mission where they're walking through the desert, and then they make it to the ocean, spoiler alert, and then have to cross the sea. It's great. You guys should check it out. American Fiction, I caught up and thought it might be able to make a top 20. Didn't quite get there, but I enjoyed it. It if you don't know about this movie, it's about an author who he's not having much luck writing the books that he's writing, which are kind of like, I don't know, heady, normal books, I would say, books that any writer might write. And it seems to him that most of the artists or the writers who are black in the world that get any kind of credit are like writing quote unquote black stories, like gangsters and, crime stories, that type of stuff. So he writes one, it becomes a big success, and he doesn't want to be defined by it. Anyway, I thought the movie did a really good job of indicting the type of popular culture made with black characters in it, and also indicting white people for like making that the only financially viable path for a black artistic expression in popular culture. But it also did that in the most gentle way possible. And so I watched it in a theater full of people older than me, if you can imagine that. Lots of cotton tops. Really enjoyed this movie. I was one of them, but didn't quite crack my top 20. May December on Kyle's list.
Mm-hmm.
I liked as well. Zach, did you get a chance to see that yet?
No.
Okay. Definitely do. I think you might enjoy it. And then also Kyle mentioned The Three Musketeers, D'Artagnan, was super fun and could have easily made my top 20 this year, but didn't. What do you got for us, Zach?
Well, I just want to mention 3 for specific reasons. One, the creator, not because I enjoyed the film all that much, but because the computer graphics were so incredible. I just really I was impressed by how seamless those were integrated into the film. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, just because it was fun to see the turtles on screen again. And then Paw Patrol, the Mighty Movie, because it was the first theater film I took my daughter to, and I have watched it 8 times this year.
Oh, wow.
It has to get an honorable mention for being a first film, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, I've got a several that I'm just going to run through because I think there's reasons people should watch them. So I'm going to go really quick. No Hard Feelings and Joyride were both raunchy comedies I watched this year. That Joyride just fell outside my top 20, and No Hard Feelings was a couple spots below that. But I think they're both worth checking out if you want something a little raunchy, a little funny. Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Was not expecting to enjoy a Dungeons and Dragons movie, but this movie is fun. It's funny. It leans into the weirdness of the world of Dungeons and Dragons and doesn't take itself too seriously. Biosphere was just such a weird movie that we all watched together.
Was that this year?
Well,
I think it was.
It's technically 2022, but it did not get a US release till 2023. So I'm including it for this year. I can't imagine like knowing about that movie and then saying like to my friends, hey, we should watch this together in a cabin in a basement. It's a weird movie to watch with you guys, but I like I like that people are making oddity movies, and I don't know, if you like something odd, go check it out for sure. The creator, same reasons, Zach. The world building was cool, the graphics are cool, the story was kind of dumb. So it's on the board of like honorable mention and disappointment, but I'm gonna leave it on the honorable mention side just because visually, plain. A movie like this will never make my top 20, but I do enjoy a good dumb action movie, and this is a good dumb action movie about Gerard Butler, who's a pilot who crash lands in like an island in the Philippines and then must save his passengers from terrorists. It's a silly setup, but it's fun. And then Dial of Destiny, that made I think James made your top 20.
Yeah.
Was based on what we've gotten recently from Indiana Jones. Was not expecting this to be good, and it was good. Not top 20 good, but better than I thought it was going to be.
Absolutely. We also have some regrets this year. Not regretful because we saw something and hated it. More just a regret that we wish we had seen these movies before we were able to make our top 20 list, because we think maybe, potentially, possibly, they might have been good enough to switch the list up here or there. I really wish I had been able to see Fallen Leaves, which is a Finnish film with the same actor as in Anatomy of a Fall. I've heard that movie's good. More of a straight drama than like a, courtroom thriller. Ferrari from Michael Mann. I've heard it's one of his better ones from recent years. I would have loved to have seen that, but didn't quite get to it. 1001, which sounds like a harrowing story of motherhood. It's on Prime. It was there for me to watch, just couldn't get to it in time. All Dirt Roads, Taste of Salt. I tried to watch. I got 30 minutes into it, and it's just such a sparse movie that I want to give it its due. And so it's one of those movies that, like, if you're watching and you pull up your phone to do something else, nothing's going to happen or get loud or get energetic all of a sudden to like catch your attention again. I think you have to sit down, do only that, and let it wash over you. And I was not giving it that opportunity in the moment. And so I paused it and put it away for now, but I do want to get back to it. Godland, I've seen on a bunch of lists and feels right up my alley. All of Us Strangers, which is fantasy drama with a little bit of fantasy, I would say. If you don't know about All of Us Strangers, go read up on it. Sounds great. And it was at the top of most people's list. And the biggest regret I have for the year is The Zone of Interest by Jonathan Glazer. Like that, everybody who has been able to see it, it seems like it's at the top or near the top of their list. And we just didn't get to it because it's not out yet. What did you guys regret?
For me, May, December, I wanted to watch. Napoleon, I still haven't had a chance to see. Zone of Interest, definitely. Dumb Money was a movie I was kind of interested in.
I like that movie. It's a 3.5, so maybe a 4 for you or higher.
Is that GameStop?
Yeah, the GameStop movie.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I wanted to see that. And a documentary just came out about Dogecoin, which I guess I want to see that as well. But the big one, and it's a movie I didn't even know about until last night, that now I'm super interested in, is called The Book of Clarence. Have either of you seen this?
Oh,
yeah,
this
the Western.
Lakeith Stanfield, right?
Yeah, but it's a Western, right?
It is not a
It's
Western.
like a biblical type movie.
Yes, it's a Jesus film.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it basically Lakeith Stanfield lives at the time of Jesus, and he doesn't want to be a nobody. And so he wants to learn what Jesus is doing and replicate it to pretend to be a Messiah, to be, famous and popular and rich or whatever. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's like somehow connected to Jay-Z, and I don't know.
It's Jesus.
It's not. And then I was like, what is this movie? I'm super intrigued by it. So I definitely want to check it out.
Nice. Book of Clarence on my regrets. Yeah, I heard about this very recently too, Zach. I'm like, oh, this seems interesting. Ferrari, Michael Mann, Adam Driver. Want to see that. There is like a 4-hour documentary about a French restaurant called Menus Plaisirs Les Trois Gras, which I really want to see.
About like a 3-star Michelin restaurant.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, not just any French restaurant, but like
Right.
a super prestigious French restaurant.
I would have
that,
no interest in that if it wasn't for the bear.
well, I will watch it. Meg and I will watch it maybe over a couple nights, and I'll report back if it's worth your time or not. Like you enjoyed Kings of Pastry, so you're on the right path for that one. American Fiction, want to see. The Iron Claw, definitely want to see. And then Zone of Interest. That's the one that is, I think, sitting out there waiting to be a top 10 movie, but didn't get there in time. Or I could hate it. Who knows?
Did you like what's the last one? It's been a while since the last one.
Under the Skin. That just fell out of my top 100. And then but Sexy Beast is top 100. So I mean Jonathan Glazer, he hits for me for sure.
Okay. Nice. All right. We watch movies. We also watch docs. Best 2023 docs. Surprisingly, I only watched 2 all year.
James, I only watched 2 all year as well.
Really?
What is so odd?
What is wrong with us? We used to watch docs like it was going out of style.
Yeah.
Now we don't. You know what the problem is? It's just too many. And I feel like as somebody who doesn't know how hard these are to make, I feel like the quality has gone down. Or maybe like it's just everything's getting made now. Yeah. Whereas only the really good stories used to get made. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it feels like the noise level on documentaries is like super high at this point.
Well, I think they're cheap to make, relatively speaking, and they're easy. Like with all the streamers, it's easy content, quotation marks, to dump out there. So
sure.
I think you're right. There's just more of them, and there's still, I'm sure, like there's still as many good ones out there as there was 20 years ago, but now there's also just a lot more crappy ones.
Yeah, could be. One I watched was called Bama Rush, and nobody should watch that. The one that people should watch is American Symphony on Netflix, which was awesome. John Batiste, who's the most well known as the piano player for Stephen Colbert. He was like the band leader for Stephen Colbert for a long time. He also won the Grammy, won like 8 Grammys in the same year, like a year or 2 ago. For his album. I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's really good. So he did a documentary where they followed him around for a year of his life. This happened to be the year that he won the Grammy, and also a year where he directed a symphony performance with your typical instruments, but also like a mixture of instruments you wouldn't expect in a symphony. Kyle, you'd probably really like this.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this.
For sure. So it's got all that, and also his wife gets cancer right at the beginning of the movie. And they make the decision on camera to continue filming, type of thing. Like they're like, maybe this isn't a good idea. Like we just signed up for a year to have a camera crew literally follow us around. Maybe this isn't the year to do that. And they decide that is the year to do that. And so the movie just takes you through the highs and lows, right? You got a guy who's wins a Grammy in the same year. Like he wins the Grammy and then goes to the hospital right after because his wife is literally in the hospital with leukemia at the time. And so it's a celebration in many ways and also just like a really good drama in other ways. So one of my favorite documentaries of recent memory for sure. And one of the 2 I watched. How about you?
Well, the two I watched, the one I definitely recommend is Take Care of Maya. That was on my top 20. And then I also watched Wildlife.
Okay.
Which it was about I forget what company it is. I think it's Patagonia. The guy who formed Patagonia, that company. He started this conservation effort in South America to like basically save trees or whatever. And then he died. And it's about like the romance he had with this other person and then the effort to like save the trees kind of a thing. And it was good if unnoteworthy.
Nice.
Well, you said, James, that we watch documentaries, but I'm not part of this we. So
You
I
don't
did
watch
watch-
too many of them.
I did watch some documentaries this past year, but none from
Mhm.
2023. So maybe on our Hangover episode, I'll talk about some of the documentaries I watched.
Nice. Cool. The last thing we're going to talk about this week before we get out of here is our biggest disappointments. This is not necessarily like the films we thought were the worst of the year. We'll cover that in our Hangover episode, the next episode you hear from us. This is more like we had some expectation that maybe wasn't met or something like that. That's what it doesn't disappoint me when a movie I didn't expect to be good turns out is not good. Things that disappoint me are typically when I have some expectation that's not quite met. So my first, and this movie made both of y'all's list, is Oppenheimer. I kind of feel like everybody loves this movie. It's probably going to win all the awards, and I like it, but man, I do not see it as like his best, Christopher Nolan's best movie type of thing. I don't.
I don't think this is.
It wasn't that movie for me.
Yeah.
But I'm happy other people like it. Hypnotic, which was a detective thriller starring Ben Affleck, directed by Robert Rodriguez. I mean, this movie, I expected it to be at least entertaining. And man, that's brutally awful, I would say. It'll show up on my worst, but just the pedigree of Ben Affleck and Robert Rodriguez, I was like 2.5 at minimum. And then it turns out they could do worse than that. 65. When are we going to get a good non-Jurassic Park dinosaur movie? 65 felt like it was going to be it. And turns out I didn't like that one either. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Probably my biggest disappointment. It was just like, man, I love Mission Impossible series. I even like Mission Impossible 2. Nobody likes that movie. And this is easily the most forgettable of all of them, I would say. I need to rewatch it. I've only seen it the once when we saw it at the, drive-in this summer. But man, I don't remember anything about that movie at this point. Missing, which was the sequel to Searching. Searching was way better than it should have been, and I guess Missing kind of proves that point because they could not duplicate that magic. And finally, Asteroid City is a movie that's showing up on a lot of lists, and I had high hopes for. It's like impeccably presented visually, but man, those characters were so cold and boring. And I was just like, this is not it, Wes. Let's go back to Rushmore era. Let's drop the artifice because we've gone too far and like kick it back to the old school because I'm an old fool. He kind of did that with the Roald Dahl stuff. There were a couple shorts in there that felt more palatable, but Asteroid City was just a cold movie for me and a pretty big disappointment. What do you guys got?
From the two that I have are Elemental by Pixar. I was really hoping for another Inside Out kind of level of movie, and this was not that for me. I thought that there was very little that was innovative or interesting or fresh, and I was rather bored by it, and I just didn't get this movie. And the second was Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. And I'm such a big fan of the Mission Impossible franchise, especially the last few movies. And so I guess I had high hopes for this, and I found this one to be incredibly subpar compared to the last run of movies. The last one was a 5 out of 5 movie for me.
Yeah.
And this one, it just seemed so like the plot was so silly and repetitive. We had so many characters expositing the plot to us over and over again to make sure we understood what was happening. And it wasn't that complicated, but they just kept telling us. And the main like set piece wasn't that impressive to me. Like he rode a motorcycle off of a ramp and then pulled a parachute. I just feel like anyone that knows how to ride a motorcycle could ride a motorcycle off a ramp. And then anyone that can pull a parachute could pull a parachute. Like it just didn't seem that impressive to me, but it's built up as impressive as like, the things he's done in other movies, which are way more impressive. So I just, I don't know. I don't get that movie. Not at all excited about the second part, but
I think my problem with that stunt is like you can go on YouTube and find 24 clips of people riding motorcycles off the edge of cliffs and pulling, you know what I mean, ripcords
Yeah.
on a parachute.
It's not an
been
innovative
done.
stunt. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
GoPro
How
was
many-
invented for that, basically.
Right. Yes.
How many
Kyle?
clips
Yeah.
are there of people climbing the Burj Khalifa? That's my question.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I have a couple disappointments. Maestro was one of them. Just because Bernstein is such a big part of American music and a big part of my music education, and this movie didn't really care about him as a musician or an artist whatsoever. So, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. I'm going to also lump with Fast X, because those are two franchises I really enjoy, and these are two entries that I thought did not work. They were also half movies, each of them. We talked about all the part 1s we've seen, and these are both part 1s that end in cliffhangers and don't make me very excited for the upcoming ones. 65. Yeah, I didn't need a great movie, but I wanted to see Adam Driver fighting dinosaurs, and I got very little of that from 65, and a lot of problem solving and daddy-daughter issues. Was not needed for 65. Saltburn, I really like Promising Young Woman. I was really looking forward to Emerald Fennell's next movie, and for me, she pushed it too far. I know you guys liked it and made both your top 20s, but for me, it was a bridge too far, a tub too far. Elemental, Zach, you mentioned this one. Yeah, it's such an average, boring movie to come from Pixar. Maybe if it didn't come from Pixar, I would be kinder to it, but I expect so much more from them. And then a movie that made both of your top 20s, I believe, is Past Lives. And I also watched this past weekend. And I liked it, but it was not remarkable to me. It kind of ended up in the middle of my list for just movies I saw in 2023. The setup is very simple, as you mentioned, James, about, this two people who connect decades later. And that's kind of it. Like, it doesn't do much with that setup and that concept. It's sort of the movie that I was expecting was the movie I got. It started and I turned to Megan and I said, I bet you this is going to open on a black screen with the sounds of a cafe in the background. And then all of a sudden, like, the production companies come up and you hear talking in the background. I was like, oh, and there was a bar. It wasn't a cafe. But I was like, oh man, I was so close. So I think I kind of called this movie before it even started, and that sort of didn't work for me. And there are interesting things in this movie. Like, she has a conversation with her husband at one point. Her husband initiates it. And this is after this friend from 2 decades ago shows up. And the husband's like, well, what if you had stayed there? What if you had married him? What if all these what ifs? And she's kind of like, well, but I don't know. Like, we can't live. Like, this is my life. Like, yeah, that stuff could have happened. And I thought that was such an interesting conversation of, like, two people being like, yeah, we just kind of met by chance and now we have this life together. What if things were different? And I wanted more from that movie. And she also kept saying things to her husband about Hae Sung from Korea. She's like, oh, he's so Korean. He does this. That's so Korean. And I was like, oh, go more into that. Like, talk about the cultural change that she's experienced, like having lived in Korea and then Canada and then America. And like, she talks about how she doesn't really identify with Korean anymore and how this guy is so Korean. And I would love for her to go more into her experience of, like, that shift. That movie had no interest in telling any of those stories, though. So I found it kind of slow, kind of ho-hum, and I was just underwhelmed by Past Lives. It got a lot of love, and it was on a lot of top lists, and that's why it's probably my biggest disappointment of the year.
Nice.
Sure.
I mean, I don't disagree with everything Kyle just said, but also a lot of the things that bothered him about it are the reasons I liked it.
Yeah, that's
So,
I mean, totally fine. I like Greta Lee. I've seen her in other things, and I hope she keeps doing great things.
sure. Yeah. I'm into it. All right. That was our top 20 of 2023 episode 617. We appreciate you joining us. Don't forget, you can always send us an email to heyguys@cinereelists.com. Send a comment, question, list suggestion, movie suggestion, any of those kinds of things. Also, send your top 10 or 20 lists of 2023. We will include it in our listener aggregate list in the next episode. So you have You have 2 weeks before our next episode to get your list in. Not a full 2 weeks. Let's say you have 10 days to get us your. I mean, we're edging up on the end of January. You should have a top 10 list here soon. So within the next week, 7 to 10 days, send it our way. heyguys@cinereelists.com, or you could drop it in the Discord. Just get it to us, and we will include it in the listener aggregate list. We'd appreciate that. Also, check us out on YouTube, support us on Patreon, leave us an Apple Podcast review, or follow us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at Cinereelists, or you can follow me on my personal Twitter or Letterboxd account at YoJRB.
And you can follow me on Twitter or Letterboxd at Shaubin.
You can find me on Letterboxd at Peter SKB.
Like we said, 1 week off. Right after that, we'll be back with The Hangover. We'll see you then. Keep it cinereal.
We're not Patreoning, correct? Okay. Wait, do you want? Should I keep recording?
Oh yeah. The curse is amazing. No, I haven't yet. Episode like 7, maybe. No. Mm-mm. Okay.
But I totally want to. Like, if Zach, if you have it in Dropbox or something, let me know. And
I can get it to you.
No, I
It's
can't.
so good.
I can't. But I want to see it. No, you guys should. Don't wait on me. You guys should record a finale. But I do want to watch it.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
I'm gonna stop recording.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.